Morning all. I just had a look at the video footage again of the Nakamura game against Grichuk. Grichuk, for those of you who don't know the name, he's currently the #2 Russian Grandmaster in the world, rank 6 overall in the world with a FIDE rating of 2771. I've been, many Grandmasters have been praising his play. For example, Jonathan Rowson, in one of the books, I saw an old game of Grischuk, playing black, very aggressive chess, very dynamic Russian Grandmaster. And here he's playing black, and okay, the question is, is he brilliant at 5-minute chess? He's not bad from this game. So against Naka, he played the Nimzo-Indian, which Naka allowed the mainline Nimzo-Indian, fine. Naka's got a bit of a surprise system up his sleeve, so he plays E3, which is Rubinstein, standard stuff, very solid continuation E3. But after castles, now Naka plays knight Ge2, so this is slightly rarer. Okay, it's disrupting this bishop, which means G3 and bishop G2 become a possibility later. Alright, now D5, and now CD, ED. So with this pawn structure configuration, black has pressure on this semi-open E file, potential outpost square is useful, E4. Black is faced with pressure on this file, and C5 might be potential square as well for white, as well as E5 anyway, if white can get an outpost on these two squares. But C6 would neutralise the pressure here as well, which is actually played by Grischuk later. Alexander, should we call him. So A3, and the bishop is not obliged to take on C3 here, especially because it's not doubling pawns or anything, so it just goes back to D6. So eyeing H2. So G3 adds a bit of support for king safety later if white's going to fianchetto that bishop and then castle. So C6, bishop G2, and now a very interesting move already, restraining white on the queen side, A5. Now this bishop here remains locked in for a number of moves in this game, so it's strategically not the best piece. Look at black's bishops by contrast. This is the problem bishop, but it's solved later on this diagonal. Actually, you'll see this maneuver in this game. But this bishop is a problem piece throughout the whole game. As we go through it, you'll see that that's a problem. Now B4, is restrained. The other point here, this knight, does it want to go over here? Maybe rook move. Or does it want to play like knight A6 to C7, which is a very interesting maneuver I was confused with a couple of times I saw the video footage. But it's got a logical basis, knight A6 to C7. It supports D5. So if black wants to liberate later with C5, he's not worrying so much about D5, which is especially critical here because that bishop always pointing at it with this knight. So supporting D5 would seem to be the idea of knight A6. So A5 does two things, as well as restrain white's queen side, supporting knight A6 to C7. F3. I'm a bit weary about seeing too many pawn moves in some of the games Naka's lost. Maybe next time he plays it, he might play a bit more solidly with white, especially. It seems he suffers the same symptoms as me. Maybe I'm getting better results with black sometimes, because as black, because you don't have the first move initiative, you sometimes play a bit more conservatively, trying to equalise and trying to provoke and stuff like that, more so than you would with white. So with white, there's a temptation to go for the attack much more, and perhaps potentially, unnecessarily weaken one's position. Okay, so in this game, C5 here, and black has a more compact position at the moment. But as I say, this bishop, okay, it's got this diagonal as well at the moment. That's kind of virtually closed off now with this next move G4, which not only restricts this bishop, but also threatens G5 at some point. And chasing the knight would mean D5 consequences. So black makes a concession now. Alexander plays H6. So is white going to further weaken his position to try and play G5? That's the question. Well, H3 is a kind of preparation for a later F4 and knight G3 to play G5. So this knight could be chased, so D5 could be put under more pressure from the bishop. That's fine, but it's still more weakening moves, and this still is at the moment a strategically bad piece, this bishop on C1. So rook E8, and you notice actually that this semi-open file pressure and this outpost square is very interesting. But black needs to solve this problem, this bishop. What is he going to do with that? The next move kind of simplifies the position strategically quite a bit, F4, because it provides a real concrete E4. The real threat of G5, okay, potentially building up. So knight C7 guards the D5. So it means that even if this knight was chased away, you know, maybe it can go to D7 or H7. D5 is not going to drop so easily. Now the move A4 is played. Okay, maybe Naka is a bit worried in this position about like B5 maybe, and it's some quick queenside play. So he's sealing the queenside a bit. But B6 and Black sorting out his problem bishop on this diagonal. And if it can come to D3 at some point, when the queen's not eyeing it, then that's fine. Okay, so now Naka plays knight G3. It's got aggressive intentions. Probably, you know, against lesser players, this would have been a very fearsome strategy for a blitz game. You know, G5, D5 being a bit weak, vulnerable. But Black plays very energetically now to exploit some of the Achilles heels in White's position, notably E4, and trying to expose this bishop as well, being a problem piece. Bishop A6. So Black's got useful pieces. Okay, this bishop's biting on granite a bit though. You could argue. Rook F2, okay, because bishop F1 was threatened as well. Queen D7. So what does Queen D7 do? Well, it actually means that this kind of quiet rook move, building up pressure, overprotecting D5, is made possible, and that safeguards Black's position in the centre. But also, you imagine, in the game continuation, something quite interesting happened later, but this was a very useful battery to have, this latent battery of rook and queen here after Queen D7, which prepares that. So Bishop D2, the bishop's really got no chance of getting out of this pawn chain. Well, there's too many pieces in the way. This is like a bit of a reverse Dutch stone wall, but this bishop's always going to be a problem here in this pawn structure. It's locked by its own pawns. Rook A D8. Okay, so we've got a latent battery in the centre. The bishop can also, I guess, come to F8 if D5 is needed for support, if G5 chases away this knight, if that becomes a real problem later. Queen F3. But at the moment, Black, with his next move, actually ignores kind of the threat of G5. Well, not ignores it. He supports the idea that he can actually move the knight forward. He plays Bishop D3. So I think G5 is going to be simply answered by taking and then Knight E4, because the bishop's now supporting E4 as well. So G5 was played anyway, which seems slightly weakening. After HG, instead of the routine FG, actually Naka slipped in D takes C5, which is very interesting, capturing away from the centre. Now let's have a quick look at this. Let's engine check this. I think Black's already better in theory, according to 3,200 player called Ribka, and my analytical assistant would say Black's much better here actually. Minus 2.08 after FG5, believe it or not. Now why? Knight E4, is this really painful for White? Well, quite a few pieces are kind of attacked. G3 and the rook. Now if takes, then let's imagine just takes. D takes. Okay, the queen must move. There is a kind of central collapse. C takes. Ouch. Because E3 is going to follow, forking rook and bishop. So say queen takes, rook takes. This is a bit of a disaster if knight D1 is forced. If knight D1 is forced, but okay, ED, there's just E3. So this is pretty nasty stuff. So Naka actually chose not to do that. He chose actually D takes C5, okay, which is the much better move. In fact, in this position, although it looks a bit anti-positional, it's actually given by Ribka as the strongest move, with only a minus 0.82 for Black. So D takes C5. Now after bishop takes, now FG. So knight E4 isn't as effectual as before, but it's played anyway. Okay. Black stands better though. He's getting better out of it. A knight takes. Okay, relieving some of this pressure. Now the other knight takes, which, okay, in this position, this does kind of justify this queen and rook battery, right? But that is again one of the strongest theoretical moves according to Ripken on brief analysis. If queen g3, then so black takes, say takes d4. This is all nasty stuff in the centre. The centre is unpleasant. Say for example ed, queen d4. Nasty threats here, like, you know, queen f2. If bishop e1, knight d5. Look at this mass centralisation. White's king just seems so vulnerable compared to the black king here. The amount of air, you know, around the white king, very, very weakening. Okay, black sounds clearly better. All right, let's turn off the Ripken monster. So after bishop e4, knight takes, d takes. Necker played queen h5, and black seals up his position on the king side quite kind of cosily with this g6 move. Although does it invite bishop c3 and a menacing dark square attack? Okay, it does mean g6 and other stuff it is stopped. It does have a little downside, okay. But is white allowed to play bishop c3? That's the question. It's something, you know, maybe white looks forward to, even with the idea of an exchange sack, you know, if needed. Or just, you know, that e3 is not going to be a problem because the rook's, it's not check anyway, so there'll be a mate on h8 if bishop c3 and queen h8 happen. Okay, is white given time though for this? Queen h4, unfortunately for Necker, he's not. And I wonder if you can spot black's next move if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, this is a very practical move, very effectual. One of the best theoretical moves when I analysed it before with the old Ripken monster. Queen takes d2. It just nullifies any white's attacking ambitions with bishop c3 and trying to exploit these dark squares. So rook and bishop for queen. e3 is also dropping off. Apparently the best move theoretically is bishop e4, but even so, black stands better now. King h1, and this e-pawn's kind of a menace actually, which even it gets much worse now. After knight d5, queen e1, the one thing threatening to take away black's pawn here is removed from the board. Rook takes g2, so a queen sack and now an exchange sack. Okay, but this is only a temporary exchange sack because after taking on e3 there'll be knight c2 with a fork. So takes, check, knight c2, and this is just absolutely horrendous because if the queen moves to take the rook, then e3, then it'll be e2, then it'll be bishop b4, then it'll be the end of the game. This pawn's just a menace. There's no pawn race because there's no candidate pawn from white. It's just a pass pawn which is unstoppable. So Necker's probably feels his position's lost now. He plays on a few moves. h4, the knight comes back. It's 3 pieces of the queen anyway, regardless of this massive pass pawn. Knight d4, coming to f5 where it will support g7, so there's no little tricks from white. Check. Okay, the last little tactical nuisance is sorted out now, hg with this pin with king g7, and also that means rook h6 as well if this pawn really needs to be forced forward, but it's prompted forward anyway. And now actually just king g8, not worrying about h7s, because h7 just take, and fortunately for black, you know, queen f7, knight g7 will be protecting the rook. If we have a look at that, this actually protects the rook, so black can get on with queening the pawn again without worrying about material loss. So this is all very unfortunate now, this position. So queen c3, there's no real threat of mate or anything, so just e3, and now Necker resigned. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.